What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Treasures Galore. I know it has been a minute since I produced my last video, and I apologize. Apparently, starting your own company and having 4 kids is not something to play around with. But in this video, I wanted to talk about something that seems blatantly obvious, and it is referring to one of the 4 smaller boxes, the past and future box. But before you call me crazy, I just want to bring up something about the Forest Fenn hunt. And I apologize if you are a new subscriber and weren't involved in the Forest Fenn treasure hunt, but that was the whole thing that got this YouTube channel started, and that's what I spent most of my time researching and going through the book and all of that. I did consider myself a book purist. That term might be new to you. There were people that called themselves poem purist, and those were people that believed that all you needed was the poem in Forrest Fenn's memoir, and they didn't really put too much merit inside the book. However, I was the exact opposite. I put almost all my merit in the book, which obviously included Forrest Fenn's poem, so I did use that. But I'd go through the poem and then go back and look for hints that would help me decipher the clues in Forrest Fenn's poem. So let's bring that back to JCB's There's Treasure Inside. So I consider myself a book purist. I don't want to get into whether I believe there's stuff that will help you inside the book, outside of part 2. They'll help you with those smaller treasure boxes, but this video is probably going to answer your question to that. So before I get into how obvious I think it is that he told us the state that the past and future box is in, I want to bring up Forrest Fenn's hunt. And that is, if the treasure was truly hidden in 9 Mile Hole, like I would say the majority of treasure hunters believe that, then it was so blatantly obvious within his memoir and through scrapbooks and everything else. From the beginning, I always believed it was in Wyoming or Montana. I was heavily on Montana for a while, but everything kept drawing me to, obviously, Yellowstone. So if you did not have the thrill of the chase, I would say a good 70% of the book was talking about his time in Yellowstone. He even has a chapter called In Love with Yellowstone. And a lot of the stories were of his childhood in the past and about his experiences, and a lot of them were fishing. And so the consensus is that it was found at 9 Mile Hole in Yellowstone. And this whole book, chapter titled In Love with Yellowstone, how much he loves Yellowstone, and all that in it. And then all of that just to find out the treasure was actually hidden there. Like, how obvious was that, right? But the 9 Mile Hole is actually included. It's on a photo description. If you do have your Thrill of the Chase book, it is on page 122. It has his father standing right by the rock where you cross the river at, you guessed it, 9 Mile Hole. Then in that chapter, Flywater, it talks about those special places, and you just can't help but think he's talking about this is where the treasure chest is hidden. So this chapter just throws up a red flag in your mind. Okay, this is where I need to look for hints and clues about the treasure. And it's listed in that chapter, 9 Mile Hole. So, it just seems really obvious, right? But then he also brings up a book, well, obviously, Flywater. That's a chapter name, but it's also off of a book that he talks about. It lists places that many of the places in this book. It's a fly fisherman's book, different places and stuff, and obviously it mentions Yellowstone. But in that Flywater book, it talks about the warm waters of the Fire Hole in Gibbon, and it forms the Madison River, which is obviously where supposedly Jack crossed to find the treasure chest. And then in his Too Far to Walk book, his second, I guess, memoir, as you could call it, in the preface of the book, he talks about um, going into the Madison, wading through the Madison River. And he talks about how far is too far to walk. And he says, he basically gives you the distance. 10 miles is too far to walk. And so if Forrest Fenn made it that obvious that the treasure chest was hidden there, and JCB alludes to it in his Forrest Fenn chapter, how did it go unfound for that long when he made it that obvious? And so I guess that's my biggest problem with that solve is it was that obvious. That was the very first place I thought of. And I know Forrest was like, oh, when the treasure's found, you're going to be like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Well, I think a lot of people did. Like a lot of people, especially in the beginning. But I guess you just didn't cross the river in time? The blaze was damaged? I don't know. But I'm just going to go off of the consensus and say, let's just say the treasure was found at 9 Mile Hole. Forrest Fenn made it very, very obvious that that was the hiding spot of the treasure. And I guess Jack was just the lucky person that was dedicated and spent months out there with a metal detector looking. So, anyways, back to the actual treasure hunt that's happening right now. So, as I mentioned before, I was talking about the past and future box. And this isn't something new. It's been brought up in Calazar's and I'm sure multiple Discord talks and all that, Reddit. But to me, it just seems blatantly obvious that, wait for it, the past and future box is in California. And I'm just going to go over this very quickly, and to me, it just seems like the most obvious. I mean, obviously, there's stuff in the word search, which leads you to California and Lake Tahoe. I mean, even the top line says Cali. I mean, it's an abbreviation, so I'm sure word search gurus are going to say that's not acceptable, but I mean, that's the first thing that I see, minus 19. So if you turn to page 224, and don't get mad at me, I know this has been discussed, but on page 224, JCB writes, as I was writing this book, I would often look at our futuristic styled treasure box as it sat in my office. Its surface would reflect a state of gold from the sunshine through my window. It seemed to beckon to me, eager for me to dispatch it quickly somewhere I loved. So I guess a couple things here. Its surface would reflect a state of gold. And dispatch it quickly somewhere I loved. So obviously we know California is called the Golden State, but it's not even that. So if you turn to page 114, it is in the chapter about, well, it's titled Massive Gold Rush Nugget, and it says make good choices. But on page 114, he writes, the experience of the gold rush formed an indelible impression of California, an adventurous land bright with opportunities for those who sought it. The miners began calling California the Golden State. This moniker later became official. California grew to be known as a place where any hardworking person might come to find success or fortune. I've now called California my home for over 20 years. It's a place I love. So just reading the book and then reading that, to me, it just seems really obvious that, for him to say it reflects a state of gold, and then for me to dispatch it quickly somewhere I loved. So, dispatch it quickly. How would you go hide a treasure box quickly? Well, obviously, it would have to be close to where you lived. And then also at the end, somewhere I loved. And I know people are going to be like, "Oh, it's past tense, loved," but you got to look at the tense of the sentence. It seemed to beckon to me, eager for me to dispatch it quickly somewhere I loved. So, on page 114, talks about California being the Golden State, and it's a place I love. So, if Forrest Fenn made it that easy, where he even tells you the exact spot where the treasure was hidden, and no one found it for 10 years, why can't JCB give the state of one of his boxes that easy? Just a question. So that's all I have for this video. I know maybe some people were hoping for more, and I will continue making content as I can. My next one, I really want to go over the Forrest Fenn chapter. A lot of interesting things in there, a lot of things I think people are looking over, and I kind of want to get your guys' take on it also. So that's what I'm really after. That autobiography really seems to intrigue me. I want to know what's inside it. So, anyways, I'll catch you guys on the other side.